What's up, Commander? BPG here, and today we're diving into the Mystic Raid team that's about to channel some serious chi energy straight down your raid lanes. This team brings martial mastery, mystic power, and some of the slickest synergy we've seen in a long time, blending control, sustain, and raw damage into one beautifully balanced squad. In this video, I'll walk you through how the team works, how to build them efficiently as a free-to-play player, and of course provide you with an infographic telling you which abilities and gear levels will give you the best value for your resources. So let's unlock the gates of the 7 cities of heaven and break down the Immortal Weapons. Now, the Immortal Weapons are the latest team entering the Age of Annihilus, marking the beginning of Chapter 3 of this brand new age in Marvel Strike Force. This team are martial masters, bringing both power and purpose to the mystic raid lanes, channeling ancient chi energy to tear through waves of enemies with devastating precision. Your lineup for the Immortal Weapons features Iron Fist World War II, Steel Serpent, Lady Bullseye, and Swordmaster, each representing a different path of martial mastery and mystic control. Their primary mission, using their chi energy to open the gates of the 8th city and trap the evil of the mystic raid lanes. But don't underestimate their strength outside of it. This team can also hold their own in Alliance War, especially when matched against other raid teams that dare to cross over them in the helicarrier halls. The Immortal Weapons is bringing something that's been missing from the mystic raid lanes for quite a while, a team that can take a beating. You've got sustain, crowd control, chi fueled damage, and synergy that will punish enemies who let them get to their turn. This team reminds me a bit of the Accursed from Chapter 1, a squad built to endure, rebalance, and then seize control of the fight through momentum and attrition. In short, this isn't just another raid team, it's a return to form for more defensive teams, and the first step into a new chapter of the Strike Force story. And first up, we have got Iron Fist, the original master of Chi himself, and one of the 2 reworked characters in the Immortal Weapons lineup. His basic martial arts attacks the primary target and chains to 2 adjacent enemies for moderate damage. The T4 is going to add an additional 40% damage to both the primary and secondary targets, bumping it from 230% to 270%. But honestly, this one is a skip. The damage bump just doesn't do enough to justify the investment, especially considering how valuable your T4s will be across this team. Next up, his special inner piece. This is your bread and butter sustain move. It heals Iron Fist and all Defender, Immortal Weapon, and Hero for Hire allies for 30% of his max health, gives defense up to the whole squad, and even fills his speed bar by 30%. In raids, he's also going to gain 2 charge, stacking up to 5, which will play a huge part in his passive later. The T4 here is essential. If Iron Fist has 3 immortal allies, it reduces the duration of all negative effects on himself and his Immortal Weapon and Heroes for Hire allies by 2 turns. That is a massive cleanse mechanic that can swing tough raid nodes in your favour, and while the text doesn't explicitly say it, it likely works like Shadow King's ultimate, meaning it may also shorten trauma, which is huge. Inner Piece is available turn 1, and so is one of his opening abilities. Moving on to his ultimate, the Iron Fist. This ability clears barrier from all enemies, strips 5 positive effects from the primary target, and hits them for heavy damage while applying offense down. It also applies speed up for 2 turns to the entire Immortal Weapons team, and in raids, again reduces the duration of all negative effects by 2 turns. Plus, it can't be blocked or dodged. You've got to love that consistency. The T4 adds another 100% damage to the primary target, and on kill, gives Iron Fist up to 5 charged if he has 3 Immortal Weapon allies. Now on paper, this sounds great, but the base damage was actually reduced from the old 700 to 400 or 500 with the T4. So it's more of a nice to have, not a must. The on-kill part is situational, and you'll often want that T4 power elsewhere. Finally, his passive, Son of Kunlun. On spawn, Iron Fist gains charged, +1 per immortal weapon ally up to 5, and heals all defenders, heroes for hire, and immortal weapon allies for 30% of his max health. If he's running with at least 3 immortal weapons allies, he also taunts for 2 turns, making him the team's frontline protector. On turn, he's going to heal again for 30% of his max health to those same allies, and when he drops below 50% health and still has charged, he'll heal the team again for 30% and apply defense up and drop his own taunt and 1 charge, so he rebalances himself mid-battle. The T4 here is absolutely essential. It gives Iron Fist and all immortal weapon allies 200% focus per charge on him, and while charged, they're also going to gain 45% damage reduction, which with defense up is going to give you a whopping 80% total. That's what makes this team so durable. This passive lets them take a beating, weather that early barrage, and then rebound with their own devastating counterattack. This T4 is the heartbeat of the entire team. No question, this one is a must. For ISO-8, Iron Fist is your frontline tank, and his survivability is going to be the key to keeping this team alive through those tough opening turns. If you've got him at lower stars, anything below 5 yellow and 5 red, then I'd recommend running him as a fortifier. That extra barrier and bonus protection will help him soak up and survive those early rounds before his healing kicks in. But once you get him up to around that 5 yellow, 5 red mark, healer's going to become your go-to class. The extra healing power not only boosts his own sustain, but also amplifies the heals he's throwing out to the team. Plus, healer also has the added benefit of removing vulnerables, which means you're reducing incoming burst damage and protecting your more fragile teammates like Lady Bullseye and Swordmaster. So early game, fortifier to survive, end game, healer to thrive. Next up, we've got Iron Fist World War II, the mentor to Danny Rand and a former immortal Iron Fist himself. He brings that same mastery of chi energy, but with a calmer, more disciplined presence that really complements the rest of the team. Starting off with his basic martial arms, he's going to attack the primary target for 250% damage and then barrier the most non-summoned injured ally for 10% of his max health. The T4 simply adds 50% damage, bumping it to 300% total. Since it's purely a damage boost, this one's an easy skip. Nothing else changes functionally. Moving on to his special, Inner Turmoil, he attacks the primary and adjacent targets for 300% damage and then extends all positive effects by 1 up to a maximum of 3 on himself and all invader and immortal weapon allies. In raids, this ability also clears heal block from himself and those same allies and then heals everyone for 30% of his max health. The T4 is going to add 50% damage to the primary and secondary targets, which again doesn't change the functionality, so this one's skippable as well. Next up, his ultimate Chi Barrage. This is where Iron Fist World War II really shows his power. He opens with a stun on the primary target, then attacks all enemies for 250% damage. In raids, he gets some really strong bonuses here. He applies stun for 1 turn, and ability block for 2 turns to the mystic enemy with the highest damage. He'll also revive a dead invader or immortal weapon ally at 50% max health, and apply stealth for 2 turns and 2 stacks of death proof to that revived character, which is a fantastic survivability boost. On top of that, he's going to heal himself and all invader and immortal weapon allies for 20% of his max health and gain 50% focus per mystic enemy for this attack, so it's going to be very reliable. The T4 is going to add 150% damage and 15% healing, and in raids it is going to extend all positive effects by an additional +1 on himself and all invader and immortal weapon allies. This one's a high value T4, it's strong across the board, but the best part of it really shines inside raids. If you're limited on T4s, it's one you'll want to come back to when you can. His passive, Tranquility through Violence, gives him some solid defensive utility. On spawn, he's going to barrier himself and all invader allies for 15% of his max health. Then on his turn, and on any invader or immortal weapon ally's turn, he's going to heal himself and all those allies for 3% of his max health. In raids, if he spawns with 4 or more invader allies, he also implies immunity for 2 turns to himself and all invader allies. And when he or an invader ally drops below 50% max health, he fills his own speed bar by 15%, but that isn't going to happen with this team. The T4 here is going to add an additional 3% healing, which on paper doesn't sound like much, but across multiple turns, it's going to add up. That said, with how much sustain this team already has, I rate this one as another high value T4. Not essential, but one that makes a noticeable difference over time. For ISO-8, when he was part of my Invaders skill raid team, Striker was the best fit, and that remains true here. The Striker class synergizes perfectly with his martial arms basic, allowing him to add barrier to the most injured ally on every ISO attack. That small, consistent sustain layer really helps this team stay upright during heavy incoming damage. The only other ISO that makes some sense here would be Raider, but with how the rest of the team's ISOs are going to be set up, Striker is the stronger choice overall. It's going to keep the sustain flowing and the damage consistent. Alright, Commander, next up we've got Steel Serpent, also known as Davos, the longtime rival of Danny Rand, who's finally realised that if he can't beat the Iron Fist, he might as well join him. Steel Serpent is going to bring the venom to this team. He is all about turn control, punishing debuffs, and crippling the enemy's momentum. Starting with his basic steel strikes, he attacks the primary target for 270% damage and applies +1 slow up to a maximum of 3, and then he's going to chain onto 2 additional targets for the same damage and effect. The T4 on this is going to add 30% damage to both the primary and secondary targets, and if the enemy already has offense down, defense down, and slow, he'll apply +1 trauma to a maximum of 2. Now, it all sounds great on paper, but this is just too conditional to get real value out of it consistently. For me, this one's a skippable T4. The setup is too specific, and the benefit too situational for the investment. His special, Serpent Slam, is where he starts to flex that control role. He attacks the primary and adjacent targets for 270% piercing damage, flips all positive effects into negatives, and applies +1 slow up to a maximum of 3. The T4 is going to add 30% piercing damage, and in raids it will reduce the speed bar by 25% on the primary and adjacent targets. That speed bar control is incredible and would normally make this an essential T4, but because it's locked behind raids, I've got it rated as a high value T4 instead. Marvel Strike Force is a turn-based game, speed control is everything, so this is one you'll want to grab when resources allow. His ultimate, Venomous Fists, takes that same control theme and adds some nasty synergy. It clears barrier from all enemies, then transfers all positive effects from an Iron Fist ally to himself. The attack's going to gain +10% damage per positive effect on Steel Serpent and 10% per negative effect on the primary target, before hitting for 400% piercing and applying 2 slow. If he gets the kill, then he'll apply +3 slow to all enemies, and remember, this attack cannot be dodged. The T4 is going to add another 100% piercing, and in raids gives him an on-kill trigger that reduces all enemy speed bar by 25%. That's another high value T4. You're getting solid control and potentially full team turn denial, but again, it's both raid locked and conditional on the kill. His passive, the Way of the Serpent, ties his entire kit together. Whenever an immortal weapon ally takes a turn, Steel Serpent is going to gain assist now, meaning he's constantly joining in on the attacks. When an enemy with slow is attacked, he's going to reduce that enemy's speed bar by 5%, and in raids, that effect spreads to all enemies. Also in raids, if the target has 3 or more turns of slow, he applies ability block to that target's primary attacker. And if he's got 3 Immortal Weapon allies, he and the team can't have their speed bars reduced, which is massive for that turn stability. The T4 adds another raid-only benefit, preventing him and his Immortal Weapon allies from gaining vulnerable. Again, this is a high-value T4, but not essential, but a very strong upgrade for raid performance and team consistency. Now for his ISO-8, I recommend Skirmisher. His passive gives him assist now on every Immortal Weapon ally's turn, which means he's consistently making those assist attacks. And Skirmisher is going to ensure those attacks reliably land their debuffs and set up vulnerables. This will create a perfect Striker Skirmisher synergy with Iron Fist World War II and one other member of this team who benefits from triggering follow-up attacks off those vulnerables. Overall, Steel Serpent is your team's engine of disruption, controlling turn order, extending debuffs, and keeping your enemy off balance while your team powers up. Next up, we've got Lady Bullseye, a character that actually almost joined the Thunderbolts team. If you remember, we got to vote on who would join that squad, and she ended up losing to Songbird and Hyperion. But I'm honestly glad she's getting a second chance, because this time, she's striking from the shadows with the Immortal Weapons. Now, when she was first announced for this team, a lot of people assumed she would be a skill character, but Scopely and even Marvel's lore hinted at something more. Lady Bullseye was trained by the mystical faction of the Hand, and if you look in game, the majority of Hand characters carry the mystic trait. So it makes perfect sense that she joins this Mystic Raid team. One other thing I love is that the devs have still given her the Thunderbolts tag. It's a nice nod to her history and a potential bonus for theory crafting outside of raids. Her basic Mystic Blades is going to attack the primary target for 270% damage, and on crit is going to apply +1 offense down to a maximum of 3. The T4 is going to add an additional 30% damage, and as you all know by now, if it's just extra damage, it's going to be a skip. Her special disappearing trick is going to hit the primary target and adjacent targets for 200% piercing and flip 2 positive effects into negative effects and apply offense down. On crit, she's also going to extend all those negative effects on the targets by +1 turn up to a maximum of 3. The T4 is going to add 50% piercing and upgrades that flip from 2 effects to all positive effects on primary and secondary targets. That is a huge upgrade and makes this one a very high value T4. Flipping everything into negatives can completely swing the momentum in your favour. Next, her ultimate Fan Dance. She starts by applying offense up to herself, all Immortal Weapon and all Thunderbolt allies, and then attacks the primary and adjacent targets for 300% piercing and clears all charged from the primary target. She then applies 1 random negative effect for 2 turns to both targets, and if she crits, she layers on slow, offense down and defense down, all for 2 turns. This attack is going to gain an extra 500% focus, and it can't be dodged or blocked. The T4 adds another 50% piercing, and in raids is going to reduce the duration of all positive effects by 2 on the primary and secondary targets. Again, that's another high value T4. The positive effect reduction is extremely powerful, but it is still locked behind that raid text. Her passive Never Misses is the engine that powers her and the whole team. On spawn in raids, she generates 4 ability energy for herself and all Immortal Weapon allies, and that is huge. It means the team can immediately use specials or ultimates on turn 1, and also helps those sims in the raids to run smoothly. Whenever an enemy with offense down is attacked, Lady Bullseye is going to deal bonus damage, hitting the primary target of the attack for 5% of their max health. She also gains 5% crit damage per Immortal Weapon or Thunderbolt ally. And if she's running with 3 Immortal Weapon allies, she's going to reduce the enemy's crit chance by 100% and prevents speed increases except from positive effects. The T4 for this adds 2 major upgrades. Firstly, she's going to apply immunity for 2 turns to herself and all Immortal Weapon allies on spawn. And she's going to gain 10% crit chance per Immortal Weapon or Thunderbolt ally. This one is essential. That team-wide immunity right at the start keeps them safe from early debuffs, and it synergizes beautifully with Swordmaster's passive, which we'll get to soon. For ISO-8, this one is simple. She is a raider, no questions asked. Her kit scales with crit chance and crit damage, and many of her abilities are going to gain extra effects on crit. Raider is going to maximize both those strengths and help her spread debuffs through those splash hits. So go Raider, build that crit and watch her slice through enemy lines with surgical precision. And finally we have Swordmaster Lin Lai, wielder of the legendary sword of Fuji and the main damage dealer of the Immortal Weapons. This is the one that you're going to go all in on. He's the team's carry, your heavy hitter, and the one who really embodies the chi-fueled offense this squad was built around. From a lore perspective, I absolutely love this choice, even if his ability names and look give me major Cloud Strife vibes from Final Fantasy. In Marvel's current lore, Lin Lai is actually the current Iron Fist, so this team is basically a lineup of Iron Fists plus Lady Bullseye keeping them sharp. His basic Star Cutter is going to attack the primary target for 270% piercing and apply +1 defense down up to a maximum of 3. He's then going to chain to 2 adjacent targets for the same effect, and counterattacks will unfortunately break this chain. The T4 in this is going to add 50% piercing damage to the primary and secondary targets. Now normally, as it's just more damage, I'll call this a skip, but because it's piercing damage and Swordmaster is the one you want to be investing in heavily, this becomes a nice to have T4. His special Whirling Assault is where he really flexes his power. If he's alongside at least 3 Immortal Weapon or Mighty Avenger allies, yes, he has the Mighty Avenger tag, he is going to reduce the duration of immunity and safeguard by 2 on all enemies. And in raids, instead he's going to reduce the duration of all positive effects by 2 on everyone. He's then going to attack all enemies for 270% piercing, applying +2 defense down and heal block for 2 turns. In raids, he's also going to stun the enemy with the highest damage, and the attack cannot be blocked, counterattacked, or dodged. The T4 is going to add 30% piercing, and the big one will apply trauma for 2 turns to all enemies. That's absolutely massive. It means your negative effects are going to stick, unless you're facing a mirror match or someone like Shadow King. This is 100% an essential T4. It's going to define how this team controls the fights. His ultimate Omni Slash clears all barrier from enemies, then applies stun and defense down to the primary target before hitting for 200% piercing, followed up by 3 bonus attacks of 100% piercing each. In raids, it's going to deal double damage, and on kill, it's going to apply stun to all adjacent targets. This is the first of this kind. This attack cannot be blocked or dodged, which makes it brutally consistent. The T4 is going to add another 100% piercing to the primary target and apply 3 defense downs to the maximum of 3. Those extra stacks of defense down are going to make a big difference in his damage ramp, so this one is a high value T4. His passive, Descendant of Fuji, ties his whole kit together and fuels this team's momentum. When an enemy with defense down is attacked, there's a 50% chance to generate 1 ability energy for Swordmaster and all Immortal Weapon allies. And in raids, that energy is guaranteed. It also heals the entire team for 5% of his max health and reduces enemy armor by 25% when they're stunned, or by an additional 75% in raids. If he has at least 3 immortal weapon allies, enemies also cannot gain offense up, which keeps their burst damage in check. The T4 adds an incredible layer of protection. On spawn, apply Safeguard to self and all immortal weapon allies for 2 turns. This is another essential T4, and when combined with Lady Bullseye's immunity on spawn, it means your positive effects are going to stick while the enemies are getting stripped away. For ISO-8, there is a small argument for Raider here because of his multi-target attacks. But with Steel Serpent consistently triggering his assists now, I think Striker is actually the better play here. Striker amplifies his already high damage output and lets him capitalise on those vulnerables from Serpent's Skirmisher ISO attack, and this is going to keep the team's combo chain rolling. Swordmaster is your finisher, fast, relentless and devastating. He's the blade that delivers the final strike once the rest of the immortal weapons have broken their enemies' defences. And there you have it, Commander, the Immortal Weapons, a team built on balance, durability and mastery of chi, blending sustain, control and devastating counterattacks into one of the most complete Mystic raid teams we've seen in a long time. Between Iron Fist sustain, Iron Fist World War II's control, Steel Serpent's speed manipulation, Lady Bullseye's precision and Swordmaster's raw power, this squad is truly embodying the spirit of the 7 cities of heaven, where skill, patience and timing are going to win the battle. From a free-to-play perspective, this is a team you can comfortably invest in long term. Their synergy makes the Mystic raids smoother, their sustain keeps them steady, and their utility in war is going to give them value outside of their main game mode. And I've got to say, it's refreshing to see a Mystic team that doesn't just rely on gimmicks or burst damage. These characters can take a beating, rebalance, and take control. As always, Commander, you can find this full infographic and more discussions about this team on the Jetson Squad Discord. Link is in the description down below. And if you want more team guides to help you dominate in Marvel Strike Force, why not check out these 2 videos right here.